So if you talk about emergency, our emergency order review, just remember, we, in our emergency order, basically wrote the governor's order. So the only thing that you can really do anything about is parking restrictions, parking fees, and whether you want to maintain the 9 o'clock live entertainment. Everything else in that order is right out of the governor's orders. The governor's orders is right out of that order, and that's not changed. I would say, I'll start off. I would say the parking regulations I would like to see stay in place. When you drop the fee back to normal parking, violation fees, fine. If you want to open up a little bit more, right now, in the commercial district, after 5 o'clock, there's no charge anywhere, even on Arden. You drop those charges. So you can park free in city parking spaces, not private parking lots. And you can park between second to second. With the governor still holding the sale of alcohol at 11 o'clock, I don't see any reason to drop the 9 o'clock. No, everybody's kind of followed our lead on that. You drop the 9 o'clock no live entertainment for gathering people when you're only going to gain an hour, and you still can only have 50% of your people there. You're not really going to create more income because you're not going to get a bigger crowd. One thing reading the governor's order today, we haven't really enforced talked about before was when you talk about 50% of occupancy of your facility, whether it's inside or outside, your employees count in that number. So if your number is 10 and you have 2 employees, you can only have 8 people. So, that's per the governor's order. So that, when you talk about outside facilities, whatever, that goes for anything. And when you talk about creating events, and they talk about parades, festivals, et cetera, that you have to maintain. You have to be able to maintain social spaces and minimum people. So in his orders, and it specifically says that whoever's the creator of these events are responsible for maintaining the social distancing, managing and operating. So that's 5 points of view. With the advent of colleges coming back in, basically no football season. I think Andrew will police chiefs around the area, the Charleston area, are all worried about college kids with nothing to do. They're still here, they're coming in here, and nothing else to do. What's going to keep them busy on the weekends? And Andrew, I believe you can talk about how many people that you had over the last 2 weekends.
Not sure where we're supposed to go set up here.
You can and here in the general area.
Just to give you an idea of how the last weekend went, I'm sure y'all were out and about. We kind of got a little bit of a reprieve with the weather on Sunday, and Monday was pretty nice. We ended up the weekend with like 62 citations, and a few outright arrests. So it was pretty busy. A lot of alcohol on the beach. That was probably the majority of our tickets. Disorderly conduct, stuff like that. A lot of college kids. I don't know if y'all spent any time out there. Parking wise was all over the place. I know it's on Billy out there. So it was busy. Like the mayor mentioned, one of our concerns is again with the colleges being back in the area, but not necessarily having in-person classes. I don't necessarily know. Today was a big drop off. We'll see what next weekend brings. I'm kind of concerned. We'll see whether or not it's going to be like a normal seasonal drop off, or it'll still kind of stay here for the next couple of weeks. Yet to be seen. But the last couple of weeks have been pretty busy.
How about the weekdays?
Not been bad. I mean, like today, it was pretty much a ghost town out there.
Right. So the weekend restrictions, I mean, I'm fine with keeping that in place for things to be crazy, but the weekdays, there's nothing going on out there. I mean, I personally think that's where we can lessen them and keep them in place on the weekends just like they are. But instead of lessening them in pieces like on the weekends, keep those in place. But the weekdays, I don't personally see where we have any issues whatsoever.
Just parking, you're talking about.
The parking.
Weekdays.
The mask stuff, I'm sorry, but the mask stuff, the governor, it's optional for different municipalities, but we should definitely keep that in place. I mean, probably through the end of the year at least, as far as mask and distancing. One thing you brought up that I'm a little leery on is you said occupancy, that's inside. We have to be at 50% occupancy, not outside.
No, it's outside too. It's your whole business. You have to be able to spread your business out where every table is at least 6 foot apart from every other table.
Right. No, that's distancing. That's not occupancy related though. You said occupancy related.
Because
I have an occupancy
you can't
because of
have
fire
no
exits.
occupancy, you have distance.
It's a fire marshal.
It's a fire marshal rule inside, not outside. As long as you have your tables 6 feet apart outside, I haven't seen anything that says you have to have a certain number of people outside, which is why I'm asking, because that leads into other things I think are going to come up in a little bit.
Well, you have to maintain social distancing outside.
Right.
And they have to be seated to be served.
Yeah.
So that everything that's inside is outside too. So I know what you're gonna bring up is talk about festivals or art festivals. If you bring those things in, who's gonna make sure that all those people are social distance?
It's not what I was going to bring up, but it was going to be brought up. I'm not particularly in favor of opening them back up, but when you said they have to be at half occupancy, I don't think so. I think if they're outside, then your occupancy commands aren't there. I just want to make sure we get clarification on it while we're here, because it's gonna be important.
That would be the mayor's interpretation would be a different one than I had. I think I'd share your interpretation where it's 50% inside social distance, but then outside social distance, but not limited to the 50% occupancy.
It's listed
Well, that-
two places in there.
Okay, well, that's being looked up. I had read about the fact that you actually met, you and your colleagues, to look at the big picture. Could you give us some feedback on that meeting?
Yeah, we met last week. One of the big topic conversation was obviously with the impending election, what's going on with all that stuff, and what to possibly expect, depending on outcomes. In addition to that, one of the things talking about with college kids coming back into town, but not necessarily having specific assignments, like in-person classes, that
Right.
just a different setup. It's not what we're used to. Normally they're back in.
You know, virtual, there's more flexibility, they're scheduled. I've done some research with the College of Charleston. So did they have recommendations? Because that actually goes past
That's inside.
into, the next couple of weeks.
Not necessarily
But it's
specific
like,
recommendations in
outward
regards
stuff,
to
too.
what we should do in regards to these types of work.
Yeah.
It was further back.
Right below it.
Hey, Tack.
Yeah, so on page 7, it does say that you have to maintain everybody 6 feet apart.
Right, but that's not linked to occupancy outside.
But there was another thing about occupancy.
I'd love to hear, because I haven't.
Hang on, it was further back when we were talking about festivals, et cetera, et cetera. Fine. Anyway. So, I guess Aaron and I can go through this page 8, going through one at a time.
Yeah, so, while we work on the masks and the parking, I just want to make sure we go over each of our emergency restrictions right now and figure out if any of them should be allowed to expire or if you guys would like to extend them. So on page 8, we have starting at number 2, really it's the first operational thing that's being affected right now. City Hall is still closed to the public and operating virtually. I'm going to see how you guys thought about that, keeping that going when this is extended.
I mean, this is spread out as y'all are now. I don't think you're gonna have the public demand that you normally would anyway.
I kind of missed that.
So right now, City Hall is closed to the public and we're
Oh, City
operating
Hall.
virtually. If this allowed, we would be extending that along with whatever else.
Okay. I
Both
got
of
it.
them.
Got it.
Teleconference for meetings for boards and commissions. If you guys don't mind, we'd like to still offer our boards and commissions the opportunity to attend virtually.
Does that have to be in this emergency provision? Because with all the work being done at City Hall, that's probably not a bad idea, just even if we don't have COVID to worry about necessarily, just with having places for them to meet, that might be the better option for boards and commissions.
Yeah, I can look into our authority to waive that beyond COVID. I know right now we're kind of operating under special dispensation from the state for COVID-related things. So if we could carry over for this renewal, and then we'll research it.
Yeah.
This one expires.
No, I think it's great, but when COVID runs out, we need to do something.
So on page 10, B1, it's talking about events and types of businesses, facilities, venues, et cetera, et cetera. And it says that total number of employees, customers, patrons, suppliers, vendors, visitors, or other persons present for or in attendance at the gathering shall not exceed 50% of the location's occupancy as determined by the fire marshal. Or 250 persons, whichever it is, because of 250 people in North Charleston Coliseum.
That's for, okay.
It says businesses, venues, gatherings.
That's not just for like special.
Pretty sure that's how it was intended.
Okay, so what we're saying, it says businesses, venues, and festivals, so,
No, it says
Well,
types of businesses, facilities, venues, services, activities, events, or mass gatherings, collectively gatherings, as set forth and further defined below, following restrictions and conditions of, number 1, it talks about 50% of occupancy of the location, as determined by the fire marshal.
it's in section 4, which is emergency restrictions on gatherings. Like, I don't know.
And DG, are you saying fire marshal does not have say, so to speak, over outdoor spaces?
Our occupancy is for our inside. That's what we were rated for inside due to fire exits, things of that sort. That's why we have different occupancy levels. How many people can we safely have inside of our building? Doesn't say anything about outside. That occupancy has nothing to do with outside because they're outside. You can get away from anything.
So COVID aside, in your configuration, you could probably comfortably see 30, 40 people back there, but for all intents and purposes, presently, I think there could be more, or they still have to be seated?
They still have to be seated.
Okay.
I'm not worried about clarification for myself. I'm worried about clarification for some of these other places that have these things that if we're going to talk about occupancy, you have to be at this. Well, how do we do that? Because I'm pretty sure that it doesn't say that. And I mean, we have those outdoor spaces and we extended them into the right of ways and stuff so that we could space more people out so that you can still have your customers, but they're all seated safely, distance apart.
Yeah, I took away the parking places to give them tables, but they still have to be 6 feet apart, and that's the X number of people that are per table, and that's all part of the same family, same rules
Right.
and regulations.
Same rules and regulations,
It
but
didn't, giving them that little bit of extra space, it gave them some extra space, but it didn't create a different question. About how many people can you put in the park? And that's what I'm saying, these are talking about venues and activities and events. And if you're talking about outside event at your place, it's a gathering. And this is talking about gathering.
wow. All right.
Joe, how do you interpret this?
I don't think there's a lot of clarity there.
Right.
I will point out that gathering is somewhat defined in subsection C, right below on page 10. And I mean, it's broad, it doesn't say restaurants. that just say things like businesses, facilities, venues. I mean, I don't know that there's a lot of clarity there. My hesitation is that there's a separate section about restaurants. So I would think that if there was that restriction meant to be applied to restaurants, it would be in section 3, which is not.
So if we were to write somebody a ticket, if we're gonna write somebody a ticket for having too many people outside, what do you think would be the next step for them? They're gonna fight that ticket. How do we defend that? Can you see a way in that governor's orders where we could legally defend that?
No, now, I mean,
Well, that's-
there's a lot, well, I'm trying to formulate, there's a lot of ways to answer that question.
But we haven't written a ticket for anybody.
We can have our own ordinance that says, puts a limit on the number of people that a restaurant can have outside. Right? And
I'm just talking about with what's in place now. I'm just talking about with what's in place now.
well,
Because it seems like we're all translating governor's orders a little differently.
yeah, well, they'd say, they might say, among other things, that, yeah, that this particular section that we're looking at, the gathering section, doesn't apply to restaurants. Whether they be successful or not, I don't know. I mean, I just want to reiterate, there's a lot of things we've seen in the last 6 months come down from the state that isn't real clear, right? Makes my job difficult. I can't create clarity where there is none.
Okay, so to be fair, I'm looking at 4 words. Business, venue, gatherings, and facilities. In my mind, there is no definition of what that is, a gathering. I don't hear anything that says outside or inside. I don't hear any of that. So I see the vagueness of what you just said. Now, are we also saying that there is another section with it directly related to restaurants?
It is. And what Joe says on page 7, section 3, and that's where the only thing we've done as a city is the distancing. Tables have to be set of 6 feet apart, people have to stay 6 feet apart, they have to stay seated while they're in the facility, they get up, they have to put their mask on. That's the only thing we've done as a city, is that. So if you spread it out and make sure that all these are done, then you make sure that your people stay seated, they're not standing around. In here it says that the restaurants and bars have to remove all the bar stools, anybody be standing at a bar gathering, that's in his orders. So that's, and it talks about face coverings have to be in place other than when eating or drinking.
And can I just add, the governor's order is the governor's order, regardless of what we do. That's gonna remain in place.
I understand.
I hope everyone understands that.
Okay, let's go back to number 1. Are we done with 1 on page 8?
Yes, sir.
Mm-hmm.
1, 2, and 3. And basically, I would keep City Hall virtual and keep our meetings virtual. 4 goes along with 3. That closes meetings to the public. 5 allows us to waive deadlines. I think that still may be applicable, especially given our recent move you guys approved. 6 is for our continuity plan, and then 7 is one I wanted to bring attention to. We've interpreted this to include city city-sponsored recreational lessons like tennis. So if you guys wanted to modify this to let us bring back the city-sponsored classes, before we shut down a second time, we'd reopen them as COVID-friendly operations with waivers and limited attendance. And then when we shut down the second time, we captured recreation on that. So I just wanted some clarification from you guys about separating our city-sponsored recreational lessons from this general special events ban. And how you guys felt about allowing the recreational
I'm good with it, and I'll tell you why. When we first did all these things, there were hardly anybody that were following the rules as far as mask and distancing and all that stuff, and we really had to come down kind of hard to stop things from going out of control. We've done that. The speed of it has slowed down tremendously, and more people are following the rules now. They're comfortable wearing their mask out in public. They're comfortable putting them on when they get up from their tables. They're good with washing their hands. Everybody is following the CDC guidelines and protocols a lot more. So I would be 100% okay with the COVID. You know, you still have your limited people and all that stuff, but resuming those services, that's something good to get people out of the house and get them doing something in a safe environment. I mean, we just can't stay locked up tight forever when our numbers are dwindling down as low as they are.
Anyone else have any thoughts on that one?
So we had
Is this just recreation or this?
Well, right now we've captured recreation under special events, so I'm going to highlight that specifically and then ask about the special events.
special events, you know, we're talking about recreation, I have any problem with it, you
Right.
control the number of people you have in a class.
Yeah.
Special events, like a Christmas parade, you can't control that. I mean, how do you?
That's just got to come up on a individual basis and see what happened at the time. I mean,
7 should stay to allow you to continue to have the authority to do that. That's all 7 says, is that you have the authority.
Right.
So
And
7 states.
yeah.
we previously just lumped recreation in under 7, but if we'd like to pull that out, just want to make sure you guys are okay with that if we restart city-sponsored recreational lessons.
All right, I have a question, just because I'm the liaison to the Park and Rec. Okay, Colleen, does that mean that, and I don't know if you wanna come up because you're the Park and Rec person? Over here? And are we saying city-sponsored people that we've been working with for recreational purposes, such as tennis, such as those types of activities, for this? Okay, you're working with them, the city works with them, that's clear.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so, all right, that's, I just wanted to kind of say that's all part of our system.
Well, and she's gonna be back on page 26, making a recommendation under staff report about.
So what, Aaron, what does that include? Tennis, basketball?
Where-
Yoga,
Yoga, possibly cricket ball,
soccer shots.
Cricket ball.
Cricket ball. Croquet.
cricket, what, you know.
I mean, obviously, not all sports are created equal, right? It's a little more difficult to socially distance in basketball than it would be in tennis or presumably soccer. You know, maybe more give consideration to that. And depending on time of day, I mean, to exert yourself with a mask on, playing basketball, I don't know how healthy that is.
Well, I think the people, like the basketball folks that are doing it, they all have a protocol already, that they're following, the same thing that schools are doing, because they're starting some of their extracurricular sports, and they have a protocol. I don't know what it is, but I think they have something that has been approved, or, you know.
Well, before you go back into any one of those, you can ask them to send the information in, and you can decide on them individually as they come up.
Right, actually, I've done that with each one of them, and they do all have procedures in place for COVID, and their basketball is even willing to be at a minimum of 5 if necessary.
Ratio.
So I asked for 10 maximum for all the sports, just as a guide, but, yes. And the coaches will be wearing masks at all times. I don't know about pickleball, and that's a kind of.
Pickleball's kind of like somebody going down there and playing tennis, they're on their own.
Yeah.
That's not
And
city
tennis, too.
sponsored. That's people going down there playing,
Pickleball.
that's billion.
Those crazy people at 7 in the morning.
Playing pickleball, they're on their own. We're not sponsoring them to do that.
Yep, so that's the connection that I just wanted to make. It's city governed, it's gone through the system, they have insurance, you know your protocols. We're basically going back to what we used to do, and it's that same process, goes through the city.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, you're up to number 8.
So 8 is the mask ordinance. Does anyone have any suggestions or things they'd like to talk about in the mask ordinance? Otherwise, it would carry over as written.
and I heard the mayor say that he wouldn't be for it, perhaps DJ's not for it, but the farmer's market and the art villages, I wonder if we could allow them to do it, but under stricter regulations. You know, make sure that the vendor locations are at least 8 feet apart, make sure every vendor has hand sanitizer available, make sure that there's a strict adherence to wearing masks and a strict adherence to social distancing.
Who's gonna manage that?
The people that run it.
So you send them a list of guidelines, and if they're not doing it when our boys in blue roll around, then they get tickets, and we put it at the bottom that we can shut down. I'm for starting to open things up like that because we're getting a lot better and people are following the rules. Like we said, I don't think they're going to mess up again. I think that they understood that, you know, the chance is there for them to get shut down again, and they'll make sure this time that their tents are apart, the people wearing masks, they'll do what they're supposed to.
They can control the tents from apart, people wearing masks in their tents, but how are they gonna control the other crowd out there?
Same way we control our crowds now.
Not very well.
Well,
Just tell me.
So are we saying the concern is, let's say I'm at the table, okay, and I'm at the village, and then there's people lined up, and if they're not in a mask, or they're not 6 feet, I mean, what is the issue with the village? I just wanna be clear for myself, as far as, is it that line that we can't control, is it, you know what I mean?
when it was first put in place, things were a lot different and people were not following the guidelines. They were not wearing masks, they were not doing distancing. It was chaos all over, and that's why we had to go kind of strict in these restrictions.
It's also tent upon tent
Yeah.
upon tent, so they were almost tied to each
Yeah,
other.
boom, 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 boom.
That's what I'm saying, you almost have to have a tent and an empty spot, you know, a tent, 8 feet.
Like instead of 30, 15, or
And then,
whatever.
and then I think the way to enforce the thing is to say, you have to cordon off the area that's gonna be your farmer's market, and it's gonna be your arts festival. And inside that cordon area, you must be wearing a mask. It doesn't matter if you bought a beer and you're walking around with a beer, you must be wearing a
You
mask
can't be walking around
inside that cordoned area. Because you're not seated, so that would apply. That's your point, right?
here. Yeah, well, so to go to this orders, you can't be walking.
And what I would say is you can't be seated inside that area either.
Right. Well,
It's-
I wouldn't think you would because you couldn't,
Right, well, you know, I guess theoretically, you could bring in a chair into the farmer's market and sit.
well, I'm sure those people would tents.
So I would say, you know, this is it. Inside this area, you're selling arts and you're selling farmer's goods and you're 8 feet apart from tent to tent and,
Eating or drinking.
right?
Don't some of them sell food and drink?
Who would?
It's a farmer's
so the
market.
Organizers of the farmer's market would kind of regulate this and follow these
Well, it
rules,
helps, so I mean,
you
I think if you
think?
have skin in the game, you make sure you manage your
So they're,
your
you
stuff.
know, we hand them a list and say, okay, you guys have to be 8 feet apart, no,
We would write that in.
write that in
In the
here,
ordinance.
right,
This is the
right.
parking lot of the washout, that location?
That's where the art village currently operates.
Okay, and in its current configuration, it does not have a secure perimeter, but we would require it to.
But that's up to the council.
And the level of accountability is to the vendor, because it's my table, my list, not the person.
The level of accountability will be on the organizer.
Yeah.
Because if somebody's not following rules and they don't invite them back next time and they put somebody else in there who will follow the rules.
So it's-
Because the organizers are gonna get shut down, not the individual vendor.
So let's say I'm the person in charge of the art village. So I'm the organizer, here are the vendors. We see a problem, it's them. It's not necessarily the person that owns the parking lot. I just want that's a question, that's all I
Well,
want.
the person who owns the parking lot is not the organizer of the art village.
Okay,
So the organizer of the art village tends to be on site managing the actual event.
so that's the key, right there.
And we can write that in, that the organizer, the person responsible has to be on site during hours of operation. That way, if there is a problem, the chief knows who to get.
So a mask while you're inside the art village at all times?
I think that's reasonable.
Yeah,
So
Yeah.
that amendment would be, and on page 10, which is item 11E, instead of saying art villages, farmers markets, and other vendor-based events are prohibited, we should say must.
Are allowed with the following restrictions.
And we've got tents 8 feet apart, no food or drink, masks required, and the organizer on site.
And hand sanitizer at each vendor station.
All right.
This is gonna sound like a stupid question, but it's a farmer's market. Don't they sell food and drink?
They can sell food to go, you can take it, go sit at your table and eat, or take it and go home,
So you can't buy an apple and eat an apple.
buy an apple and eat it when you go home.
Pretty authoritarian.
Well, you know.
I mean-
A real farmer's market, they don't have a place that they sell food to eat and drink.
Oh, we
Real
don't have
farmer's
anything
market
real.
sells vegetables that people buy and take home, it's not like a place. This is an art village, this art village is all over the place, it's not really an art village, it's not a farmer's market. It's just a conglomeration of people, citizens.
So back to the secure perimeter, the organizer would have to secure the perimeter to limit occupancy, right? So even if vendor A through K, they could turn people away if there are too many at a given table. But how do we, if we don't have that secure perimeter, how are we going to restrict the number of people who are in the parking lot? So it would seem to me that we want to have a secure perimeter, and if so, the organizer would provide for that, or does the city going to loan them the equipment to secure that perimeter? Because then if we have a secure perimeter, then you can have a entry point at which you could limit the crowd size, 50, 75, one in, one out, like a bar or restaurant.
I
I wouldn't
mean,
want to overcomplicate it. I would just set the bar, set the restrictions, and tell people, here it is. And if that means you got to put up fences to control it, or if that means you're going to walk around and tell people to ease back to the table spot or out on the street or whatever, you do whatever you got to do. It's not our problem. I don't want to inherit their problem. I would just say, here's the restrictions, here are the rules, and you follow the rules, or this easing will be undone.
And I think it's a start too, like if this goes well, then, maybe you can have food and drink in there, but it's gotta be small because we know
It's a
how.
baby step.
Yeah.
But if you make them wear a mask the whole time they're not gonna have food and drink. I mean,
Well, I'm
you're
just
gonna
saying,
do
like,
one or the other.
in the future, like, okay, it's gone really well.
Hopefully in
and,
the future will be.
Well, right, but,
Like we talked about.
and by December or something.
what do y'all think? What's that gonna look like for y'all? I mean, I'm curious. What do we have to get to for that to be a reality? 0? I mean,
I haven't even.
we're down to like 40 a day in Charleston County. I mean, we're the lowest we've been since quarantine. I'm just curious what that looks like to y'all.
I think we've got some things to jump over. We've got school to start back and to kind of find that rhythm and see what that's gonna look like. You've got the flu season coming. We have some things coming towards us that we don't know what it's gonna do to all of us.
Yeah, we do have
It's
football season.
worthwhile.
We
It's
got the only ones that
worthwhile
matter.
taking it slow.
Huh?
We do have football season. We got the only ones that matter.
But you can't put so many people, they won't let so many people in. It's not like 70,000 people in the football stadium like it usually is, occupies
Well,
everybody's time.
Right, but they're starting with baby steps and a portion of their population that go
Well,
back.
And to your question, what that's gonna look like is, what's that gonna look like to government master's orders, because what you're talking about here is a little bit of, in his orders, but, like, we're talking about, what are you gonna do about occupancies in restaurants, what are you gonna do about sale of alcohol, what are you gonna do about, those kind of things, what are you gonna do about the number of people you can put in a football stadium, those all are coming from the state, so, there's a what they think it looks like.
Well, I wasn't asking about his. I was asking about ours and what y'all thought.
But I'm just saying, ours is pretty much, you're pretty much doing everything you can do, you won't run into his.
Did Joe have something to say?
Yeah, the farmers markets probably do qualify as a gathering under the governor's orders. So they're already limited to half the occupancy, everyone's gotta wear a mask.
But half the occupancy of what? Because it's out in a parking lot that doesn't have an occupancy rating, is what I'm getting at.
Well, it would if you give them an area. If you
So is there a certain person per square foot that we need to put in there? Because that's what I was asking. It's outside.
You gotta stay 6 feet apart, and I guess you do have to figure it on, figure a formula
Well,
to
that's
that.
why I was asking earlier
It's
what
been
we're
a
looking at here.
problem Other places of, how do you determine occupancy? I mean, I don't know if, are you aware of any occupancy restriction for an outdoor?
I mean, I could talk about, just think about it from a common sense standpoint. If you have to exit any area through a structure, it would automatically apply because you have to filter through. Like if it was a fenced off area and the only way to exit was to go through the building, the occupancy would have to apply. So I mean, I don't know if there's a specific, maybe.
We're talking about the farmer's market and the parking lot of the washout. So off the top of your head, what would an occupancy for that look like?
Well, you know what the size of that is?
I have no idea.
I don't have any idea either.
Big.
Well, I said if you
It's a
said,
full lot.
well, it's not a full lot, because he's got tables out there, and part of it, I'm sure he's not gonna do up dining tables for the art market.
Well, that's their decision. I mean,
I'm assuming there's probably a calculation when you take the square footage and, distance.
5 by 6 at least.
And that would be your threshold, because of the distance in your phone.
So just say they had a place that was 36 by 36, and, I don't know what.
So it's bigger than that.
Should we just say 1 for every 6 square feet?
It'd be 3 tenths by 3 tenths.
Well, to be honest with you, that's an example.
Well, I was just using that as an example, and then you take, multiply that and divide it by 6, and that would give you.
The problem is when you have it in that situation, it's really part of the restaurant. I mean, because people are bringing alcohol, I guess maybe even food, into the parking lot area.
Well, that's what we said, we would not allow. We said we would.
And how-
No, no, right
But
now,
I'm saying,
because they got tables set up.
In a
Half the
normal
parking lot's
world.
blocked off, and they got tables set up.
that's part of the restaurant, it seems to me. I mean, it's
that the
I mean, I'm not talking about the park now, I'm talking about, that's part of the restaurant.
I'm going back to language again, I'm going back to businesses, venues, gatherings, and facilities. Those are the most vaguest terms that I have, pretty much can say language-wise, Joe. So,
Wait a minute, you starting to pick out words out of a whole paragraph.
exactly.
So you can't, you
Yeah,
can't
so
really do that.
all I wanna say is, because of that, it's my understanding that what we do is apply, and I might be,
Because she said a half a page to find what gatherings are right here.
exactly.
So
So
you have
a
a definition.
gathering, so
But-
it's Joe's interpretation to me that we're trying to figure out, because it is vague. And so, do you have anything more to add to that, Joe?
I don't know that it's all that, I mean, it's vague as whether that applies to a restaurant.
Okay,
I'm not real convinced that it does.
Okay.
Especially since there's a separate section dealing with restaurants.
mm-hmm,
But when we're dealing with a farmer's market or an art market, it seems to me to fall pretty squarely into gathering shall be defined as a planned or spontaneous indoor or outdoor event
Mhm.
that involves or is reasonably expected to involve a large number of people physically present, congregating together. I mean,
right.
to me, that seems like, yeah, the farmer's market's gonna qualify for that.
so you just put one person for every 6 feet, like we just figured out, and that's your number.
That boils down to about 1 person for every 144 square feet.
But then you gotta take out, you're gonna do 8 square feet, and 8 square feet, and 8 square feet, or whatever the 10th thing is. That takes away the number of that square footage of that total area.
It's gotten so complicated.
I think we're overcomplicating.
We're overcomplicating it way off.
I think you just say, you let people into the market, they gotta stay 6 feet apart. Unless they're all part of the same family, in which case then it doesn't apply. I mean, there's so many layers to this, it gets more and more complicated. But I think if you say the setup, to Joe's point, you don't allow the tables for the restaurant to overlap into the area that's defined as the farmer's market. Therefore, the farmer's market is not part of the restaurant is not part of the farmer's market. And then you just say that tables have to be, that vendor stations have to be 8 feet apart, and everybody has to maintain social distance, wear a mask, and have sanitizer. And then it's up to the organizer to figure out how to meet all those hurdles. But
I love the kids principal.
I mean, I don't even know there's 5 people that would vote for it, so, you know, let me just show of hands, it might end the conversation right here.
Well, we're not doing that very often.
Okay. We got enough,
Anything else for the mask ordinance?
because we're getting ready.
F, during the duration of this emergency order, bands, DJs, et cetera, during crowds after 9 p.m. We talked about eliminating that, using the 11 p.m. cutoff.
When we did that, the 11 p.m. cutoff was not in play.
Right.
With the 11 p.m. cutoff in play, to be honest with you, and I was one of the ones that fought for this. I helped write it to put it in here. And I think with the 11 o'clock cutoff, that's excessive. It's cutting everything off early enough anyway. I mean, you're not getting people out that late. It's really not. So I personally do not see where that extra 2 hours is hurting anything extra than it, you're packing them in earlier, you're spreading them out later. If we were still going till 2, then yeah, that'd be one thing, but we're not.
We can just revert to our
Noise ordinance,
which is
right.
10 o'clock
Yeah.
during the week and 11 o'clock on weekends.
I mean, that's just one thing to swipe out of there.
So basically, it looks like the only thing we might be keeping is the mask ordinance with everything we've just discussed.
I didn't get that feeling.
We're keeping everything so far.
Well, right, just as part of the discussion.
All right, let's get the parking out of the way, because
Yeah.
it's 6:45.
Yeah.
We haven't touched anything else.
Okay, parking. I know we've all been in receipt of likely the very same deluge of emails. Some are clearly misguided. I think there's a perception that we've forced a lack of social distancing upon the public by only opening up free parking on East Arctic Avenue, when in reality, those spaces were always taken. Not only that, so were those on Ashley, and Cooper, and the numbered streets. So we've certainly reduced crowd sizes compared to what it was. But in its truest sense, we do have a 6-mile-long island, and we're only providing free parking in a 12-block span. So a few ideas I want to socialize. I'll start with what I think are the least objectionable. Again, having all of us receive the same emails. Maybe I'll look to Chief Gilreath. Have you noticed an issue with disabled parking and there not being enough spots? I know we received an email to that effect.
No, what I always get, it just seems like people aren't educating themselves. I was out and about this weekend and people would stop me, obviously, when they see me, like, where can we park? And I'd be like, anywhere along this road, any parking lot, oh, okay, well, that's not bad. It's like, it's just a lack of educating themselves. I think they think that you can only park like between second and second in the paid lots or any of those little, like,
Well-
we're all forcing people to park downtown. When we have lots across this entire island. I don't know.
The reader signs are a little confusing as well.
But the question in particular was for disabled motorists. I know we have so many
Well,
handicap
the
parking
handicap
spaces.
parking spots, we don't take it regardless. So even if it's on 9th Street or
Right.
wherever it is, like, those are, if you're a handicapped person,
Right.
that's the golden ticket, like, you're good.
Someone wrote in and said there aren't enough spots.
That's-
They drive around.
We
they
have
can't
not,
find it.
we have not stopped a single handicap spot.
Nor have they been reduced, they're not ticketed, and I've actually talked to folks about that, so there was no.
Truly not a problem.
No, there was,
And
there
also,
was,
the parking contractor has never charged for any
No.
parking in the state lots either,
No.
prior to COVID.
Yeah, well, it's a state law, that
No,
if you have a
they can't.
handicap parking spot, you can park in any paid spot, not just a placarded spot.
correct.
But
It sounds very long.
the key is don't be like one lady who called me, her granddaughter got a ticket. And she was in the car with her, and she's handicapped. I said, well, did you have a handicap placard in the car? Well, no, I didn't have one. Did you have a handicap license plate on your car? Well, no. I said, well, then, how does anybody know?
Yeah, that's all helpful. Food for thought, we may wish to consider, in terms of what we're allowing currently on East Arctic Avenue, maybe every other block even only, for instance, but extend the entire length of the island, so that would open up Ashley Avenue on both sides. We may not in the process necessarily be adding that much more parking, but at least we're spreading the crowds. And I wasn't part of the initial, well, I guess I was technically, but I know a lot following into before we chose to re-up East Arctic Avenue. Was part of that to assist in policing the activity of the beach, and are we still patrolling from end to end? Okay, so if we were to go every other block with parking, but go island-wide to disperse crowds even more so than we are today, that would create an additional burden on public safety to monitor the beachfront.
It would not create any additional burden in regards to monitoring. The burden is people aren't even clear on what's going on now. I think that's just going to be even more confusing to like the average
Right.
beachgoer.
Yeah, I can appreciate the simplicity of, and still it's lost, it's lost on so many, that East Arctic is available for free parking, where it's not otherwise indicated as pay. This would be East Arctic, I should say Arctic and Ashley, even blocks only. I mean, that too, I think, is as simple, but again, it spreads it out, and I'm not gonna try to convince everyone of this, but it may be net neutral in terms of the number of additional spaces. It could be a slight add, but at least it spreads people around in a way that some don't feel comfortable with, residents and non-residents alike, in terms of what they're encountering on the beach.
I just think
That's
it'd
complicated.
be too difficult to
Yeah.
try to get people educated.
Well,
Keep it simple.
then you're gonna get this, well, I don't want people parking in front of my house. Why they have to park here and not there? And then you're gonna overcomplicate things quick. Yeah.
More to educate people, it's every other block, even block, you can't park here, there's a lot of block, I mean, it's just.
There's a million signs on this island. People don't read them now.
I mean, we put up the cones with the no parking like y'all suggested, and I think it's a good idea. But they'll literally park on both sides of the cone, just not where the cone's at. And then be like, oh, I thought that was just right here.
We'll move the cones.
Oh, move the
We'll move them.
Move them.
Yeah. And then yell at us, still got a ticket. It's like, okay, well.
And then lastly, DJ made a point earlier, which was on my list, about potentially restoring parking, maybe not to what it was before, but certainly view Monday through Thursday differently than Friday through Sunday. And if it's not now, maybe it's 15 days, 30 days from now, once we see if this is the new normal, if it's quiet, as the chief described it would be. I anticipate it will continue to be that way, because even though not all children have physically returned to school, they have to be in front of a computer for X hours a day. It's sort of disruptive to the routine of coming out to the beach for a family. I do expect things to be as quiet as they have been historically this time of year, if not even more so.
It's the time, I can just add to that. I'm actually leaning the other way, and I have a clear reason for that. Previous dean, I have information, literally, the College of Charleston is totally prepared for COVID in the sense of they've hired COVID trackers, they understand they might have to shut down once they come, so on and so forth. So once I thought about, well, the children are in, and I was like, wait a minute, I have to put the other hat on. So I really want to share with you, I don't have to be confidential anymore about it, because if you punch in Indeed, we all could have a job as a tracker, because they're anticipating it, and they have appointed the director, of COVID. So I just want to say that in my mind, that had me go, all right, what is the timing? What is really fair? What it is past the children getting into school? So I want to put that on the table, because I was headed one way, and then I got this additional information, just to let you know.
I'm sorry. What would the information have to do with parking at the beach? I missed that.
Because it's gonna be an uptick. It's gonna
You
be.
think there's gonna be an uptick at College of Charleston that we're gonna?
Of students returning at least to the beginning of October. I'm just saying. It's the reality, and they are planning on COVID because they're in the residence halls.
Well, they should be planning on COVID. They're an institution, they're inviting the public back to it.
I'm just gonna finish my sentence, and it's all yours, okay, all yours. What I'm saying is, not only planning for it, but understanding they could become a hotspot, they could actually know that those students are going to go wherever, and they're also planning potentially to make a decision after that if more students should go virtual. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so, any other things? Like parking?
The Center Street parking, were the ones we have blocked off. I've heard this from numerous people that live here. This is not Charleston County at all. But if there aren't businesses taking advantage of it, there's not enough people on the sidewalks to necessitate the extra room anymore. We can open that up so our locals can use Center Street as a place to park and visit local businesses, the post office, churches. It will be City Hall, but not right now. I mean, if they're not using the spaces, then why do we still have them blocked off?
How many places aren't using the spaces, would you say?
I don't know. I mean, you ride down, you got these right here, you got a couple over there, you got some over there. I mean,
I don't feel like it's,
if you open up 15 spaces, it's 15 more than you had for people. I mean, I hear this from people that live here, that live on Fifth Block. They want to come down and do this and that, and they can't because they can't park on Center Street anymore. They can't park in the commercial district because employees and everybody else are parking there. And they're just, when we put them in, we needed them because we needed extra spacing between people on the sidewalks. We were slammed with people and we needed it. But if they're not being utilized, I don't see the point in continuing to block them
utilized
off.
for residential only parking with your decal.
That, whatever you want to do, open up for some sort of parking. I mean, they're not being utilized now. What's the point of doing it?
Well, you have to be careful opening it up because, you know, if you open up the spaces like the washout, they're not using, that's easy. But you can't open up the spaces at Woody's because he's using it.
Right.
As overflow. If you go back to the other side, Jacket Cups, those guys are using it.
They're using a couple right out there, but there's a couple that they aren't.
If you're not using it, you can't really open up that one parking space.
Surf Bar doesn't have any. Surf Bar doesn't have any.
Tacowood does, Frida's does.
I mean, some players using them, but some aren't. We can open up. I mean, 10 spaces is better than it was. Then, you know, Gene Fallow can
I'm
get
just
off.
saying, if you just try, I would not try to open up one space if there's people using them right beside that one space.
No.
The stretch,
Hey,
washout, I can understand.
I brought it up.
And that's
Take it where you want.
know.
All we're talking about is the barrier, and we're discussing possibly, if it's not used, we create space in between the parking, because you did it along the whole street.
Yeah, we took the whole street out because everybody had an opportunity to use it. as a
Whatever.
overflow.
Okay, that's, okay.
How do you feel about the fines?
What are we doing with the,
Standard fees?
if we're leaving it 7 days a week? I think, I mean, and I hate to say you split it up, but Monday through Thursday, there's no problem, and it definitely shouldn't be $150. On the weekends, you want to leave it in place. Sure, if you think it's going to blow up, then I see that. But I'm going to preach that Monday through Thursday at least as much as I can. There is nothing going on out here Monday through Thursday.
Well, Monday through Thursday, if we were to follow that, then Monday through Thursday, the only violation would be a regular parking ticket for $60. And then the emergency ordinance would only cover Friday, Saturday, Sunday, so that would take care of itself, so right there. But
If we do that.
Your question would be, if we do
$60
Monday through Thursday, then 150 would still count for Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Well, that wasn't my question. My question was, if we just did $60 Monday through Sunday to Sunday, not split it up.
That almost ends up being cheaper than parking if we don't.
Not this time of year, though. They only hit those numbers for holiday weekends. And that's what we were trying to get through. Because, I mean, I remember our conversation. We made it because we cut it in half. They get up to $50, $60 on weekends. Now they're not getting over $20. I mean, to be honest with you, you could lower those and be fine. I think that, and I'll be very honest with you, in fact, they even give this to you. Take it away Monday through Thursday, take away parking restrictions away, and just keep it on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and keep the fines at $150. Then that way you're serious about it on the weekends, but you understand that the weekdays we do not have an issue, and unless we do have another issue pop up, then, you know, you put that back to normal. You know, but keep it severe on the weekends because of what you said. I mean, it sounds like the majority of people in here are still worried about, especially the weekends in high-risk areas. So keep it in place on the weekends and leave Monday through Thursday open.
And the previous number,
We don't have, oh,
Yeah, it's not public.
thanks. No.
and the previous fine was 60. So we're saying 60 during the day, or during the weekdays. Is that what we, no, we're not.
Just a regular parking violation.
Just regular, they're different amounts.
Legally, whatever it is.
Oh, whatever it is.
Different amounts depending on different, you know, handicap spot versus tire and road. I think it's 40,
Gotcha.
handicap spots 100, 200.
So go back to what we did.
Right, is it? I can't remember what it is. I have yet to write one of those tickets.
Okay. I only wrote one. So we'll go back to what was prior COVID. However, maintain the 150 for the weekends. Then the question is, what, I'm just reverting. The question is, define weekend, like what?
You know,
Friday, Saturday.
I understand what you're saying, and I understand what you're saying about weekend versus weekdays, blah, blah, blah. But then I think that, instead of just keeping it one way or the other, that almost lends credence to their, oh, you're just trying to create a private island on the weekends. You know, you're not doing it on the weekdays, but I have to work, but you're doing it on the weekends when I'm off. I mean, yeah.
Who cares?
I don't feel that. I think it's
Who
crowds.
cares?
I mean, that's when we're gonna get busy.
We've straightened them out enough.
And it might change as it gets cooler and fewer people come out, but I don't think that's.
That's the reason we can drop we can drop the excessive parking restrictions and fines on the weekdays because kids are back in school, we're out of Labor Day, we're out of our holidays, we're out of our summertime. So during the week, there's not an issue. So Joe Blow from James Island can walk his dog on the beach and park on Ashley with no problems, just like he used to be able to do. You know, and obviously we're not trying to create a private island because we've just opened up the majority of the week, except for the high risk times. We're phasing things back, just like we said we would from the beginning. I mean, we knew that. We did it before. It's, you know, you can interpret emails however you want to.
I understand what you're saying, but that's what's. So what you're saying is you want to change number 12 to. Well, the E should be 5. PM, 6 AM, but as it is right this minute, I don't care if we go back even further, but that would be on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and then that would be.
So you add a line at the front, the very top one, no parking in any city right of way, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, except just add Friday, Saturday, Sunday right there. And that keeps your 3 big days in effect. And then if we notice that that's working, then, you know, hey, we can reduce that further the next time. I mean, we're doing the same thing we did months ago and we phased back our opening. I mean, in my mind. Give allowances where you can, see if people act right, things don't get out of hand, and you allow a little more.
We just run out of time.
Hey,
We didn't get to
Shocker.
the mooring and
we didn't even finish this one.
you got close to it. I'll say that. So, you got 2 minutes, we need to take a restroom break. We'll miss the opportunity.